for love to ever last. I fall in love too fast. I fall in love too fast. I fall in love too easily. I fall in love too fast. I fall in love too terribly hard for love to ever last. I fall in love too fast. I fall in love too fast.
Hi all. It's 6 p.m. Dr. Uy and Hui Min, you want to turn on your video? Hi. Hi, Hui Min. Hi, Dr. Lee. So anyway, it's 6 p.m. and we are live. A very good evening to our fellow audience in Zoom and Facebook Live. I'm Hazel from Dr. Extentis, and you are very welcome to today's session titled Living with Cancer When Someone You Love Has Cancer. So Dr. Extentis is Singapore's largest health platform aimed at increasing the accessibility of credible health information. And through our health content, we hope to empower you guys to make a more informed decision with anything health related. So I'm very excited to be joined by our panelists for today, Dr. Lee Wei Song from International Care Cancer Specialist and Cancer Survivor, Hui Min. But before I properly introduce our panelists, I'm just going to run through some general housekeeping. So first off, we are recording today's webinar and it will be available on our Facebook page, Dr. Extentis, for you to revisit after the webinar. We will also be sending you the link to this recording tomorrow in the post-webinar EDM that you will receive, so you can stay tuned for your inbox. And secondly, we will be having a live Q&A with Dr. Lee and Hui Min towards the end of the webinar. So throughout our conversation, please feel free to use the Q&A function in Zoom. And for our Facebook Live audience, it's the comment box down below. And we do hope that we will have time to get to all of the questions, but it's very hard to judge in advance. But not to worry, you can leave your questions in our website, drextentis.com. And also, yeah, actually that's all for housekeeping. Let's properly meet our panelists. I'm very happy to introduce to you Dr. Lee Wei Song. He's currently a medical oncologist and medical director at the International Cancer Specialist, Paragon Medical. Before his current practice, Dr. Lee was with the National Cancer Centre Singapore, NCCS, and Raffles Hospital. Currently, he's also a visiting specialist at the NCCS. His main interest lies in lung, breast, and colon cancers. He frequents conferences around the world to continuously update his knowledge in the latest cancer treatment. So Dr. Lee, would you like to kick things off by giving our audience a background of the work you do?
Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone. I hope my voice is quite clear here.
Very clear.
So I trained originally in Dublin in Ireland. I was there for about 14 years. I did my oncology there. So I did my undergraduate, then I did my cancer care there, my training there and all that. Then returned back. Well, actually I went to Canada for 3 years after that, before returning here. And then I spent about 10 years in National Cancer Centre before going out to Raffles Hospital for a couple of years. And then now I am in a clinic in Paragon. So I look after most solid tumors. Solid tumor being differentiated from leukemias and lymphoma, which is cancer of the blood, which is looked after by hematologists. So I'm familiar with most solid tumors, but for the purpose of today's presentation, we are talking about the other side of cancer, which most people ignore, and people tend to forget about this when we concentrate so much on the treatment and the outcomes and the survival, and nobody talks much about the support and the emotional component of cancer care.
Yeah, Thank you, Dr. Wee. So next up, I'm very happy to introduce to you cancer survivor Hui Min. Hui Min was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a form of bone cancer, when she was 15. Hui Min, would you like to introduce yourself and perhaps give a brief overview of your journey with cancer for our audience?
Hi, my name is Hui Min. So basically, I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma. It's like a solid tumor on my left kneecap. And back then, I was still in secondary school, but right now, I'm like turning 21 already.
That's great. So today's topic on cancer, it's a really heavy one. So for our audience, some of you may be caregivers of a cancer patient, or you may be a cancer patient yourself. And through today's webinar with Dr. Wee and Hui Min, we hope to provide you guys with the relevant knowledge and support to get through this period. And to start off, Dr. Wee has kindly prepared a presentation on today's topic where he will dive in depth into the different aspects of supporting a cancer patient. So after Dr. Wee's presentation, we will then explore Hui Min's story, where she'll give us insights on today's topic from a perspective of a former cancer patient herself. So Dr. Wee, you can start sharing your screen. While Dr. Wee is sharing his screen, I would like to remind our Zoom and Facebook Live audience that you can ask questions. So please leave your questions in the Q&A function in Zoom, and for our Facebook Live audience, it's the comment box down below. So Dr. Wee, you can start sharing your screen. Okay, that's nice.
Give me a minute.
Dr. Wee,
Is this working?
Yeah, you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. So let me just reiterate. Today we are talking about the emotional, the supportive component of cancer care, not so much about cancer treatment specifics or any type of cancer. This is more to deal with how do we support the patient, how do we support the carer of the patient who is undergoing treatment. And for discussion purposes, treatment of cancer does not revolve only around chemotherapy. There's also things like radiotherapy, there's also things like surgery, there's also things like targeted therapy, which a lot of people talk about these days. Targeted therapy, just in gist, is usually tablets that are targeted against certain genes. So it's seen as a much more tolerable treatment to chemotherapy because you just pop a pill and it controls the cancer very well. So it is one of the latest treatments that we have. And lastly, also immunotherapy. But it is not the purpose of today to talk about all these treatment options, but the care of a patient undergoing all these cancer treatment is pretty much the same. It doesn't matter whether they are popping a pill or coming for an infusion. So to make things clearer, it is important to differentiate between caring for somebody with early cancer versus somebody with advanced cancer. Early cancer meaning that the cancer has already been taken out, the patient has to undergo a fixed number of cycles of chemotherapy. So it means that within 3-4 months or 6 months, their treatment is done and they're cancer free. So that is for early cancer. And the care for these patients tend to be shorter and more limited, whereas care for advanced cancer patient, meaning that the cancer is not fully cured, but is under control. And this control can last anywhere from like 6 months to 5 years or 10 years even. It is possible for patients with stage 4, certain types of cancer that they live beyond 4, 5, and even up to 8, 9, 10 years, as I mentioned before. So without elaborating further, let me show you my first slide. So a caregiver can be anyone. It can be mostly is family members, but we have patients who are single or may not have family here, or who is a PR and then changed to citizen here and they are here alone. Actually, I have patients like that. What a caregiver does is really to help out with day-to-day activities. It can be anywhere from transporting patients to appointments or even calling up the clinic for them on the behalf, or buying food. So it can be something really, really small, or it can be something that needs a lot of planning. Also, not to forget the emotional and the spiritual support as well. So they sometimes just need a listening ear, and not to, they have a lot of complaints, not complaining about stuff, but complaints as in like symptoms, and need to just voice it out. So very often we as carer or carers tend to firstly put patient as number one, and then totally put aside and forget their own needs and own feelings and just concentrate fully on the patient. This is okay in the short term and in the beginning, maybe the first few weeks, but it can get very fatiguing, and it will be very difficult to keep up the long term. So I put in asterisk here, it is important for everyone, even including the patient, that you take care of yourself as well. So that component cannot be forgotten. We have to keep reminding, and I keep reminding the carer as well, that they have to sleep and eat, and apart from looking after the patient. So the carer also is involved in a lot of decision making, and in this culture in Singapore, in our Asian society, as compared to the West, where I used to work, a lot of time the decisions come from family members. Sometimes I even have patients to say, talk to my son or talk to my dad. They will make the decision for me, and I'll just follow what they say. So it is not uncommon to hear that in Singapore. So these treatment goals we talk about just now, I was saying, for early versus advanced cancer, treatment goal for early cancer is to prevent relapse, whereas treatment goal for advanced cancer is to maintain quality of life and prolong survival. So there is a slight difference there is a major difference between the two, but the care that is provided, that is needed, is the same. So for advanced cancers, we sometimes have to talk about, do we use home care or not? Do we need other people come to the house and all that? Financial decision is another real thing. It's a very practical thing. It's a reality that not everybody has insurance. We have government schemes, we have Medifund and all that to help with the financial component as well. And as sometimes we may even get social workers to come and see if there's any other way that we can obtain help for certain patients. So sometimes we also have quite extended family. So it could be a niece that always follow the patient here. It could be the daughter, but not just one person. Sometimes, the patient has an entire family, right? They can take turns to look after them. It cannot just be one person that takes care of everything. Some may contribute financially and all that. So all this is very family dependent, very culture dependent, not one size fits all kind of thing. But in order to come to all this decision making, they have to be well informed. So that is where the doctors, the healthcare professionals, the nursing staff all give proper information, full information on what is needed, what the treatment is about, what are different options and all that. So we always tell patients not to come on their own, always bring somebody with them, even a friend or a colleague if the family is not free, so that usually there's all information shared. So the ability to recall this is a bit difficult. Sometimes I even let patients just record what we discussed so that they can remember it. So the typical things that we talk about are like life expectation, the treatment, the side effects, new data, what are pros and cons of treatment or no treatment. We cannot assume that the patient always wants treatment. There are patients who actually decide to do complementary medicine instead of going for the usual treatment. We respect that decision. We do give them all the pros and cons about that as well. So it is, as I said, very cultural. Whether your loved one's wish is to make their own decision, choose their own treatment goals and proceed everything as per their wishes, or they just want to leave it all to the family member. So we have two extremes and we have something in between as well. So of course, stress of the diagnosis, stress of the unknown, stress of the fear of side effects and all this, and the stress from lack of sleep and all that is going to affect decision making. So I always tell carers and patients that if there's any major decision to be made, it doesn't have to be in the clinic right after I finish talking. I ask them to go home, talk to the family, have a meeting even, and can come back a few days later and let us know the decision. So it could be decision about treatment, decision about the goals, decision about when to start even, that kind of thing. So all these are affected by different beliefs, different belief system, different expectations of the outcome. And as I said, some patients want to know everything and they Google everything and go to Facebook before coming to see us. Or some don't even want to hear about it, just go on with treatment. I have both type of patients as well. So I have patients who say, look, just give me the treatment, I'll come and go, but don't tell me how the cancer is progressing or how is it responding even. So we have the different spectrum. But mostly patients do want to focus on cancer itself, and this is natural. This is very typical of expectation that we do want to treat the cancer. Treating the cancer doesn't mean that we are definitely want to give side effect. A lot of people always assume that treatment makes it worse. actually treatment is meant to prevent the cancer from making a person worse, because what the patient feel is the effect of the cancer. So cancer causing pain, cancer causing shortness of breath, cancer causing fatigue and all that is the effect of the cancer. So the treatment is not meant to make this worse. The treatment is supposed to shrink the cancer. This is for advanced cancers. Shrink the cancer so that the patient don't feel so much symptoms from the cancer. Of course, treatment has its side effects, so we have to manage this very carefully. There is a very fine balance between symptoms from treatment versus symptoms from the cancer. So all this can be discussed. Palliative care is something that we offer to patients who may not want to proceed with treatment after, let's say after a few cycles, they decided they don't want any more. So what palliative care entails is actually the care of cancer symptoms without tackling the cancer itself. So we give painkillers, we give oxygen, we give fluids, that kind of thing. So this is all palliative care doesn't mean that it's just from the doctors. I mean, even family members, the carers and all that can be can provide family care, palliative care. Palliative care, the other word is comfort care. So basically making patients comfortable. You know, sometimes we even give nerve block for pain, like injecting something into the nerve to block the pain. So that is also considered palliative care. It is not directly killing the cancer, but it is to improve the symptoms. And sometimes when it's beyond the carer's ability to look after patient, we do suggest hospice care, where it's an institution where the patient stays in an institution where nurses and doctors come and see them and provide them all the relief from the cancer symptoms, but not really treating the cancer itself. So that essentially is palliative care. So again, this is more pertaining the advanced cancers, because I'm focusing more on advanced cancers because the stress on the carer is a little bit more. Whereas, as I said earlier, the stress, the carer for somebody with early cancer is that they finish the treatment after 6 months, they are done, and then life is mostly back to normal once they resume the employment and all that. So advanced cancer is when the symptoms of cancer is progressing. They may respond to treatment for a while, but the cancer may start growing again, then they may have more pain and all that. So all this is part of the cancer progression. And what we do want patient and carer to be aware of is there are facilities available, and there's a lot of supports and from foundations and all that, which you can find out in the internet nowadays, and also from Cancer Society. There are a lot of support groups around. I wouldn't spend too much time on this slide because this is mostly about palliative care and hospice care that we talked about earlier on. So pain is the most common symptom that patients need care with, and usually it is also the most stressful for patient and carer, because carers sometimes will feel very helpless when the patient is in pain, and after trying all the medicine, they really feel like there's nothing else they can do, and usually, you know, they have to bring patient to clinic or bring to emergency for pain control. So it is not uncommon for cancer patients to be admitted to hospital for pain control, actually. So pain are two types. There are pain from the cancer, and there's also pain from related to treatment. Treatment doesn't cause pain directly. I'm just saying, if the treatment side effects causes, let's say, a mouth ulcer, so the mouth ulcer will give you pain as well. So that is like a treatment related pain. So if we manage the pain really well, then the patient will have very good quality of life. So that is what we want to do. And we cannot assume that pain, we don't want to accept that pain is part and parcel of the cancer. We can treat that, it can be managed very well. There are patients who have very high pain tolerance. They rather not go to a clinic or hospital in case the family drag them there. So they will try to hide it from the family as well. So sometimes it does depend on the carer to pick up cues like frowning of the eyelash or you know, like cringing when they're doing certain things. So look out for changes in looks, the personality, the mood. You know, somebody can get very easily frustrated if they're in pain. Like a toothache, it can give you a lot of frustration. If they sleep very badly, if they lost their appetite, they cannot eat. So pay attention in all these changes, and sometimes the patient may not tell you themselves that they have pain. You know, a lot of time is a lot of hesitancy in seeking help. So what to ask when the carer comes to the clinic with the patient? I always tell patient and carer to make a list. You know, I have seen lists that is like half a page long, A4 size long. It can be very long or it can be very short, but again, is what is important to you and the patient, because there are differences in expectations, there are differences in cultures, there are families who want to know everything, there are families who doesn't want to know everything. So take notes, check with doctor if it's okay to record. I mean, nowadays everybody carries a phone, so it's not uncommon that sometimes one family member record it for the rest of siblings to hear the consultation. But do seek the permission from the healthcare professional. When a patient comes to see me, we do have emergency numbers to contact. You know, after office hours, I tell patient go emergency. If not, we have like after hours answering machine to forward messages to us. But if there's any emergency, please do go to emergency department. That is very helpful to keep a folder of all the results, because sometimes we have patients who go between institution or may have a test in another clinic or may have a blood test from a GP. Do keep everything in one place, so that it's very helpful for whichever doctor that you see, or even end on emergency, so they can just flip up and see what's the latest blood results and all that. So that one is quite very helpful. I always find in my years of treating patients, if a patient has a folder of all the results, because it's impossible to remember everything, and the patient themselves wouldn't have the energy to do this. Of course, now we have cloud, so Dropbox, Google Drive, all these are very helpful as well. So know your strengths and limits as the helper, as the carer, because the demand is very great, and it may also get more and more as time goes by. So the demand on it will change. New changes present new challenges. So a new symptom may put more stress on you. If the patient suddenly become more short of breath, as let's say lung cancer progresses, then you may have to support more the patient when he wants to go toilet, or you know, in elderly patients and all that. So there are tasks that can be delegated. It doesn't mean that one person has to do everything. You know, be willing to ask for help is what I'm saying. Do expect the changes to come, and the amount of help that is needed does vary at different time points. So examples of help, we can talk about household chores, cleaning, cooking, or even just sharing and listening, because even sitting there and listen takes time as well. A lot of time we are in this modern society, we are doing our job, we are trying to do shopping, we're trying to do cooking, and there's nobody who sits with the patient and listen and talk and all that. So that part is also very important. Of course, it's very time consuming, so it should be delegated to different people as well. Like driving to appointments, picking up prescription, look up information, be the contact person for updates and keeping others updated. These are all very important of components of a carer's function. So of course, there are some people who will say no. I mean, we even have family members who may say no, or there are some siblings who may not agree with each other. So, you know, of course, it may make you angry and you know, feel unfair and all that. But you know, every family is different, so we cannot get involved in specifics of it. So most of the time, patients do end up having one or two carers that has more time, and some may even quit the job to look after the cancer patient. So but do understand some of them may have their own problem, and which is why they don't want to help, or they have a very bad experience and all that. So life planning, again, is something that we work towards, and it's not very much discussed in our culture as well, like wills, insurance, advance directives. Advance directives are instructions not to resuscitate if, you know, a person stops breathing and all that. So these are more, let's talk about over here. Living arrangement and work issues are more commonly discussed. So this is again family dependent. What are the resources available? Funeral wishes tend to be discussed as well. So work issues, living arrangement, funeral wishes are more commonly talked about amongst families. So as I say in the very first slide, that do care about yourself, because you will go through a ton of emotions. There will be guilt, there will be hopelessness, there will be worry, sadness, anxiety, grief, hurt, anger, loneliness, denial. A lot of these can run through your mind. It's like a roller coaster, right? So don't be afraid to talk about it with somebody else, or even talk with a healthcare professional. Apart from seeing the patient, we talk to family members as well. So cancer care involves treating the whole family, really. It's not just talking to the patient and ignore the person sitting next to the patient. So that is very important. So small things that you do yourself, it sounds very simple, but it's not easily done. Like sleeping is completely important. Something that the modern world people always forget: exercising, keeping up hobby, shopping, catching up with friends. You need time to yourselves as well. So things that began done together, basically, again, these are just simple stuff. But what I want to tell people is that the last thing you want to do is like Google on the internet for wrong information. So maybe we can talk about a little bit more in the discussion later. So I'll stop right here because this thing is quite subjective. So maybe it'll be easier if somebody asks a specific question later on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee. You can stop your screen sharing already.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay. So thank you, Dr. Lee, for the presentation. I think it's a really comprehensive overview of the different ways you can support cancer patients while at the same time taking care of your own mental health. I think that's very important. Don't forget about yourself while you are caring for a cancer patient. So I would like to move on to Hui Min's story. So first off, again, thank you, Hui Min, for being here today and being so willing to share your story with us. It's definitely not something that's easy to share about. And I'm sure that your story will provide the audience with first-hand insights on how to better support someone with cancer. So you mentioned that you were diagnosed with bone cancer, a form of bone cancer when you were 15. But at what age were you like completely cancer-free?
So I was diagnosed with osteosarcoma when I was 15.
Mm.
But I only finished the treatment a year later. So it will make me like 16, turning 17. Yeah.
Right. So, but were you still schooling throughout your treatment period?
So basically throughout my treatment, I just stopped school and then like I had to withdraw from my national exams to focus on my treatment instead.
National exam. Was it O levels? O levels.
N levels.
N level, right? Okay. And I would think that the scariest moment would be the first diagnosis when the doctor breaks to you that about your cancer. But how did the first meeting actually go? How did you feel upon receiving the diagnosis?
I think I could still remember the day quite vividly because I remember it was 28 April 2015. It was around 10 a.m. plus. Yeah. Because, you know, it's just the day that you can never ever forget in your life. And we walked into the doctor's room thinking that, oh, maybe it's just a ligament tear, but I didn't know why they called me down the day right after I finished my MRI. So they called me down to SGH and then they just broke the news saying that, oh, you know, your daughter has like bone cancer and she might need chemotherapy. And I was like, huh, chemotherapy? And, you know, from what the media portrays, chemotherapy is not an easy treatment, you know. I see people, like, from what the media portrays, is just like, patients vomiting a lot, they lose their hair, they become so weak and they need people to help them with their daily tasks. Yeah, so I was just very worried. And because cancer is not very common in my age group and I don't really know anyone with cancer, so it was a bit hard for me to seek help at a point of time.
And how did your family react like to the news?
So they were really shocked because no one expected it because I'm the first one to get diagnosed with cancer in my family actually.
So there's no history.
Yeah, there's no history at all. So they thought it was like genetics or something, but no one in my family actually had cancer. So I'm the first. And their initial reaction was, okay, so who's going to take care of me, you know? So my mom actually had to quit her job as a tour guide and then she became my full-time caregiver.
So Dr. Lee, for yourself, how do your patients usually react when you break the news to them?
So Hui Ming is described quite clearly most of the reaction that I see. They always remember the very moment, the date of the bad news, and it usually comes as a shock. The first reaction is also why me and how did this happen? And so why is a very big question, and why me is a very big question. And what happens next. So the fear of treatment, unfortunately, throughout the years, TV, dramas, movies have portrayed cancer treatment as very bad. So I'm not saying that it's not. Chemotherapy is not easy, but of course, there are ways to mitigate that. We sometimes give lower doses, sometimes we use targeted therapy, sometimes we use radiation therapy, sometimes we use immunotherapy. So not everything needs chemotherapy now. thankfully.
Mm.
But there are
Mm.
things that we need to give chemotherapy. So, but in terms of side effects, that we will tell patients that treatment is not as bad as 30 years ago. Nowadays, people seldom vomit. We even have patients who finish the treatment and go back to work half day. So we try to tell patients that the disruption we try to minimize as much as possible. Where if I feel that you need to take a break from work, I'll let the patient know there are treatment that takes a few days to complete. There are treatment that only take like few hours to complete. So it's very different for different types of cancer. But the most important thing is for the patient having somebody next to them when that diagnosis is given. It should not be given to patient on their own. We always tell patient, please come with somebody. Yeah.
But after working in the field for so long and like breaking it to so many people in a way, how do you think like the family member who is there with the patient should, I wouldn't say react. It's very hard to control emotions, of course, but how do you think they can better support the patient upon breaking the news?
The best way is to really help take down notes and to note what was said, because the patient will be in shock. Of course, the carer will be in shock as well, but it is so important that they picked up the right information during their consultation. So the patient will only hear half of what you're saying after you told them the diagnosis already. So it's very important for a carer to take out a piece of paper. And sometimes I just extend them a piece of paper with a pen. I say, please write down what I'm going to tell you now. So I'll give them the salient points and all that. But again, it's not just a one consultation, give all information kind of thing. I always say there will be questions later on. You only hear what you have heard today so far. But there are certain things that needs to be noted down, because sometimes the patient will come back a few weeks later and say, oh, I thought you told me just to eat fish porridge, but nothing was said about food restriction. It's a very Chinese or very Asian thing that's pantang food that you cannot eat when you're on chemo and all that, like, poisonous food or heaty food and all that. But it was never mentioned. So, and so, a patient could lose weight a few weeks later, and I say, I never mentioned about the diet component. So this can happen. So yeah, keeping down notes is very important.
Okay. And Hui Min, what were you and your family's initial concerns when you first heard the news?
Firstly, it was like financial, because like cancer treatment is not cheap. Yeah, but thankfully we had some savings, and we had MediSave as well. So that was quite relief. And then we are Singaporeans, so we could use our CPF. So I was using my dad's CPF because I'm still a student and I don't work. Yeah, but the initial concern was how am I going to break the news to my teachers, telling them that I can't go back to school anymore because I need to focus on my treatment.
Okay, and for Dr. Lee, what are the other concerns that you have heard that your patients mentioned?
A lot to do with first of all, schooling and work. Yeah, that is very that almost always runs second after the diagnosis shock, right? The second thing is like, how do I work? How do I support myself? How do I do the treatment when I'm not earning the income and all that? So that is a real concern. If they are living alone, then they are wondering like, should I move back to my with my parents, or should I move in to look after my mother if the mother is the patient? So living arrangement and work is the second and third most concerns, most important concerns for carers. Yeah.
And I think you mentioned that I guess Hui Min is considered young, but then for older people, they will have different kinds of concerns. So is there a difference between like older cancer patients versus younger cancer patients?
Yes. The older ones, actually, there are a certain proportion who say, look, I'm old enough, I may not want the treatment. So their concern is about spending their children's money. So the financial part again comes back in. They will say, look, I'm already 70 years old. Actually, 70 in terms of cancer diagnosis is still considered youngish. Because we have patients who are 80, 85 years old who are still undergoing chemotherapy. It is not impossible. We just have to choose the treatment properly. So yeah, a lot of them say, look, I don't want to do it, or they are afraid of side effects. So older patients tend to think that the body cannot handle it in terms of treatment, and also that financially they may not handle it. But I always tell people choosing chemotherapy fitness for treatment is not based on age, it's not chronological.
Oh,
We
okay.
have patients who are 75 years old who are driving around and who's running like 5 clicks a day. We have people who are 50 years old with diabetes and high blood pressure. So choosing the two, I would say the older patient is fitter for treatment actually. So it's the coexisting illnesses. So
Mm.
that is important to consider.
And if you were to insist, as in if they were to insist that I don't want to go through treatment, even though you strongly believe that they can and they are a fit candidate,
Yeah.
what do you usually do?
So a lot of time they will go to Chinese medicine, right? So I would say, look, it is your own right as long as you have all the information. It is your own decision. Nobody can force you to do it. What I can
Yeah.
help is that if they want, I can monitor the response to the treatment. So sometimes they say, you want to go off and try 2 months of Chinese medicine first. You come back and I'll do a scan again and show you whether is the cancer smaller or is the blood test better and all that. So a lot of time they are very accepting. They will say, okay, let me try the Chinese medicine for 1-2 months, and then if it doesn't work, then come back to chemotherapy or other treatment again. So yeah, we never force patients to choose. Yeah, some of them will say, let me think about it, and they may come back like 1-2 months later before they make the decision.
Right. Okay. So for Hui Min, what type of treatments did you go through during your cancer journey?
So I went through the typical infusion kind of chemo, and I went through surgery. So for chemotherapy, I actually had to be in the hospital from Tuesday to Saturday for 5 days.
Oh.
Yeah, because my infusion is for 72 hours straight. Yeah, for the first 2 cycles, doxorubicin, methotrexate, and then they had to hydrate me for 2 days. And then they had to check my bloods and everything. But chemo is it differs because the thing is, everyone reacts differently lah. And then the dosage also differs because they need to measure via your body surface area is, they need to check your weight and height every single time. And then but most of the time I'm in hospital 5 days a week. Even if I don't do like the heavy chemo, I still have a lighter chemo, which is like a methotrexate. But they still have to like continue to monitor me because it's quite toxic to my
Kidneys.
and liver. Yeah, so they had to monitor my liver function and kidneys also. Yeah.
And I think like we mentioned that chemo, it's widely portrayed in the media. It's when you think cancer, the first thing you think about is chemo. But what actually happens during chemo? Like what can you expect? Is it painful?
So chemotherapy.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. Maybe Hui Min can start first, then Dr. Lee, you can chime in.
Go ahead.
So for me personally, when they start the chemo, because I had a CVC port, so they'll just they'll just infuse the chemo for me, and then I'll start to feel very drowsy, like a hangover kind of thing. Then I'll just fall asleep, but after that I'll just wake up feeling like, oh, there's this metallic taste in my tongue, I just don't feel very well, and I start to vomit a lot. Yeah.
Oh, so the actual chemo itself, you don't really feel anything. It's only after then you feel like the effects of chemo.
Yeah, that's for me. Yeah.
Dr. Lee, you want to chime in now?
So Hui Mei has quite intensive chemo lah. Hers lasts a few days. Like I say, there are chemo that lasts a few days. There are also ones that last half an hour or 1 hour every 3 weeks kind of thing. So yeah, different people respond differently to chemo. What is expected is the drip goes into the arm. There's a needle in the arm, but in Hui Min's case, because it goes through so continuously, they put in something called a CVC central venous catheter, where they have a line in so that the drip can go in continuously. So the side effects are different for different chemotherapy, not necessarily just related to the dose. A lot of people think the higher dose, the more hair you lose. Actually, it's not like that. It's the type of chemotherapy actually. There are types of chemotherapy that will make you lose hair. There are types that won't make you lose hair even if you give 1,000 milligrams. So it's just the type of chemotherapy. And then in Hui Min's case, chemotherapy is quite nauseating. So the moment you go in, you get this metallic taste and all that kind of stuff. And then there are chemo that you can just eat right after. So that is different types of chemo, not so much the doses. The doses are based on your height and weight, of course. Yeah. So there are more to. So Hui Min's treatment has to be chemotherapy, unfortunately, at that time. In this day and age, for example, skin cancer, lung cancer, liver cancer, there's a lot more cancers now. The first line of treatment is no longer chemotherapy, is with targeted therapy or immunotherapy. So we have lung cancer patients who have not had chemotherapy for the first 4 years. They are just taking a pill every day, which is a targeted therapy. And then after that, the next year could be immunotherapy. So still not chemotherapy. But for Hui Min's osteosarcoma, it is still with chemotherapy. So there are differences in types of cancer.
And for Hui Min, for someone who personally went through chemo, what kind of support do you feel chemo patients would need after going through it yourself?
I guess in terms of support, you give like emotional support, because for my type of chemo, I lost hair, and I was like weak all the time, and I remember like vomiting 5 to 6 times a day, and then like it was so bad. Then I just had to admit to the clinic myself and tell the doctor, oh, I need this anti-nausea thing, because the moment I take it via my mouth, then I'll just puke it out. So I'll just ask them, oh, can you please inject this for me, because I can't eat it. So so I lost a lot of weight. So when it comes to support, I think fellow cancer patients come in the best.
Okay, I think just now you mentioned about losing hair, and we think about chemo automatically. We also think about losing hair because it's portrayed in the media and everywhere. So as girls, I think hair does contribute to a certain extent to our identity. And as much as they say that it's just hair, it can grow back again, blah blah blah. But I think as a girl, but more at an age where you do care about how you look. How did you feel about losing your hair during the whole chemotherapy?
So when I was diagnosed, I was only 15, at the age of 15, you're quite vain, and then you're very self-conscious about your looks, So at the point of time, my uniform group GB officer, right, she told me to just shave my hair first, because once you see your hair fall in clumps, and then you feel very upset. So I decided to shave my hair right before I started chemo, and then so when it falls out in clumps, right, it's not really in clumps, but it's just like small little tiny strands of hair. But it was very, very patchy, so I didn't like how it looked. So I just tried to shave it all. So I shave quite regularly. So it looks like quite even, And then but when I go out, I mean, if I do go out for walks, I wear a mask, and sometimes I wear a cap instead of like a beanie, because it's very humid in Singapore. And if I don't feel like it, then I'll just like not wear any cap or.
Were you self-conscious at first?
Was I self-conscious? Not really. I was actually like quite proud of my body. I was like, wow, I have such a nice head.
Okay, that's actually quite cute. Yeah, but I think it's not easy, especially at, like you say, at 15. Who's not vain? I'm very, very vain when I was 15. But yeah. So, and also looking back, what was the most challenging part during your treatment?
I think during treatment, the most challenging part was a doctor's visit, when they update you, how you responding to the chemo and things like that. And also to deal with like the side effects of chemo and my surgery lah. But thankfully, I had good emotional support from my medical team. So my oncologist was very, very nice. And I had a lot of nurses with me, and a lot of friends also.
That's very nice. And I think just now you mentioned some community support groups that really help you tide through your cancer journey. So what available support groups are there out there that you feel would be useful for our audience today?
So it differs from like cancer to cancer lah. So for breast cancer, you have Breast Cancer Foundation. So for children, typically below the age of 18 age, you know, you have Children Cancer Foundation. And then we have very huge support groups like colon cancer, lung cancer support groups. So for myself, I was in the adolescents and young adults support group. So currently I'm like the patient lead for adolescents and young adult support group. So we do have friends from like who are diagnosed with different cancer, like breast cancer and different stages as well. Yeah.
Dr. Wee, are you involved in like the different cancer groups? The
So
support groups?
when I was in National Cancer Center, I used to give talks or share things with breast cancer patients, breast cancer group. So again, like Hui Min said, there are different cancers in support groups. So I was more involved with breast cancer at that time, about 10 years ago, and I can speak Malay. So we also have like a specific Malay group as well for
Okay, that's nice.
patients. So sometimes and they bring the hot pot, so we have like share food together
that's
and
so
on a
nice.
Saturday and talk about whatever they want to ask. So it's very, very warm and very involving, and it's quite cheerful and things like that. So that's very good. And nowadays with social media, now we have Facebook support group. But I do want to caution that sometimes we may get like wrong info from, you know, this support group can have like 60,000 members inside. So, you know, it's inevitable you might get some wrong information in those things. So I, like Hui Min say, the local support group, more in context with our culture, more important, same age group, you know, the expectation will be the same. Those are more important and face to face. Yeah.
That's very nice. I think when you have cancer, I think it would be nice to have someone that you can relate to also. I think for Hui Min, you can understand that. Yeah. And also, the next question I have for you, Hui Min, is what's your greatest takeaway after living with cancer and being a cancer survivor?
I think, you know, as cliche as it sounds, it's really about perspective. So it's like how they say, if you see the glass half full or half empty, you know. So I'm very thankful that I've lived for the past 21 years lah. You know, I'm very thankful to the medical team, you know, for taking care of me. And you know, because at the point of time I was very, very worried about my life expectancy. You know, would I pass on at 16? You know, we were talking about funeral, you know, my wishes and stuff like that. But you know, thankfully I'm still alive. Yeah. So I think I'm very grateful that I have been alive for the past 21 years. And even though to others it might seem like a very short part of their life, but to me it's a huge part already. Yeah. So I always have this wish. So like every birthday, I would volunteer in a palliative care place like hospice, because like you know, for me an additional 1 year, it's so much more to me. So I would like to bless it with others. Yeah.
I got chills there listening to you say that, legit. But another question I have for you is how has your family relationships changed after being diagnosed with cancer and surviving cancer, of course?
I think it didn't really change a lot, but like, you know, since COVID, you know, everyone is just staying at home. Yeah. And then we kind of like have like more family dinners. Yeah. But you know, because we are all Asians, you know, we don't really talk about emotional support, but I do know that they will always be there for me, like physically. So yeah.
Okay. And I think another topic that we can talk about is how to talk to someone with cancer. Are there any things that you don't like to hear or questions you don't like to answer about your cancer?
I think there are very sensitive questions. Like for example, someone immediately come up to me and say, "Oh, how's your life expectancy, or like how's your fertility rate?" You know.
Oh my god! Someone asked
so it's
you
a bit
that?
weird. And like 2 days ago, I had a random guy, because I have a huge scar on my leg, you know, from the surgery that I had to replace my tumor with. So part and parcel of life is how I deal with people's stare. So like 3 days ago, this uncle randomly came up to me and he cursed at me and he was like, 这么你的脚这样的, which means oh, why your leg like that? Yeah, but he was cursing the NB word.
Ah,
Yeah, so I was
oh.
like, oh my god, I was so triggered. But you know, I've dealt with this for the past 5 years, and then like I have to deal with this like more. But it was my choice to wear shorts. So I think the public can be more thoughtful, you know, don't stare. Even if it's just not a scar, you know, it can be like, for example, someone on a wheelchair or someone with someone who may look quote unquote abnormal to you. Yeah, don't stare. Yeah. But it's kind of obvious because it's like the black dot right in the center of the whiteboard. So
Yeah.
people will stare, but try not to. Yeah. But if you come up to me and ask about, oh, what happened to your leg, then I would tell lah. Yeah. But sometimes if I cannot be bothered, then I would just like say, oh, I got into like a motorcycle accident and then like I fractured my leg, and then I'll just come up with some random story to scare people
The story
off.
the story changes all the time. Is it? See what you feel that day.
Yeah, so it depends. So I can come up with stories like, oh, I was on the way to A level, and then my dad is like some butcher, and then now I become some lawyer already. You know, it depends. It depends on my mood of the day, you know. Yeah.
Oh my god. I think it's very funny how you kind of like have fun with this, even though it can be a very serious subject. But yeah. And another question is what should someone take note of when speaking to an individual with cancer?
Yeah, so be thoughtful, and you know,
Yeah.
is I think it's good to always check in on them. Because to me a cancer journey never ends even after you stop your treatment. You know, there's always a fear of relapse, and like there's long-term side effects that one has to deal with. Yeah, so you can check in on them, say, oh hey, how are you? You know, once in a while just ask lor. Yeah.
So cute. Okay, I have a question for Dr. Lee. As someone who has been working in the field for so long, what's one advice you would give to a caregiver of a cancer patient?
Well, there's no one big advice. I mean, everything that was said is kind of part and parcel of what the carer should expect or be doing. I guess just the simplest thing, like Hui Min said, as cliche as it sounds, just to be there for the patient, either emotionally or physically. You just have to be there or available in this day and age, because most families sometimes have one single child, sometimes it's both parents working, sometimes all children working, nobody look after, sometimes it's one maid, sometimes it's no maid. So a lot of this has caused the unavailability of support to the patient. Sometimes patients are left alone.
Yeah.
They are okay at home alone, but again, they are alone at home. So even though they are not sick or not vomiting from the treatment and all that, there's still no emotional support. So it's easier said than done, but it's just really be there for the patient. Yeah.
And what's one advice you would give to someone who has just been diagnosed with cancer?
So look at big picture, like to quote Hui Min. The thing is it always sounds bad in the beginning, and the fear of the unknown really is overpowering. A lot of patients come down after the first cycle of chemo, then they know what to expect already. Even if it's a bad thing, then at least you know that, okay, after this chemo, I'm going to feel bad for 3 days. So they know what to expect. So then they calm down a lot more after that. So humor is important in this, and our patients have, just as Hui Min, I'm sure Hui Min knows the entire ward staff by then, and all the nurses will know who she is and what her favorite toy is and all that kind of stuff. So it is not a sprint, it is a marathon. It's like a lifelong kind of thing. It's very, sometimes patients make friends with nurses and our staff and all that, and they become, it's a persisting relationship. So all this is important, is all the support.
And after working as an oncologist for so many years, what is your greatest takeaway from your career?
I think be thankful for everything. The family part is so important. Sleep is important. I keep telling people nowadays that cancer patients are getting younger and younger. Of course, there are genetic components involved. There are aggressive cancers that tend to affect the younger people. But stress is such a major component of life now that I think people are sleeping less, immune systems are being suppressed. They are eating crappier food, not sleeping well, playing with a lot of phones and screens and iPads and all that. So much so that we don't even know what we are putting into our mouth. So I think it's more awareness, and again for public to be more aware as well, so that it doesn't stigmatize the cancer patient, just as Hui Min has undergone some bad experiences. I think ignorance is such a big thing in our society still, despite being first world country, the ignorance is still there. So much so that I have patients who don't want to go out with a bald head. Yeah, whereas overseas, they just wear a scarf and it's like a fashion, right? So that's like 30 scarves for 30 days. My patients love it over there. So, and I have patients who like buy 3 weeks and just change their hairstyle every month. So there are people who take it in a stride and just enjoy the thing. So yeah, but I also have patients who refuse to start treatment because it will lose hair, and then 6 months later the cancer get worse, then only they start the treatment. So there are big spectrums of patients.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Lee, as well as Hui Min. I think we're going to move into the Q&A portion of our webinar. So we do have a question right now on our Zoom. And the person asked, I think this question is mostly maybe directed to Hui Min first. Can you kindly describe the mindset of cancer patients towards society?
I think I can only speak for myself. But for me, my mindset towards the society is sometimes I get a little bit angry when it comes to like negative experience, because I think it's a lot about like what Dr. Lee said. It's a lot about awareness and education. Yeah. So sometimes I'll encounter like a mom, trying to close a kid's eyes whenever I walk past, because of my leg. So this is something that I have to deal with from day to day life. So it's not just about like cancer, but just like how people see quote unquote abnormality. Yeah. But how I see the society is Singaporeans, we need to learn a lot more. Yeah. And like I think our pace of life is a bit fast. Like we focus so much on our work and our life, but we forget to look outside and see, how's the sun setting today? Take a look at the trees, stop being on our phone whenever we're on a bus and take a look outside. The beauty of nature and everything. And it's really about appreciate everything.
I think going through like cancer, the whole period, I think it makes you more present in the moment, and then you won't be distracted with like your phone. Just know how to take things slowly. And for Dr. Lee, after talking to your patients for so many years, do you have any input on this? Like, how do your patients feel towards society? I guess that's the question.
I think a lot of the let me see. Well, there isn't so much about. I think my job was mainly to manage patients aesthetic purpose. So I would tell them, look, people may look at you with a bald head and all that, but please understand that it's temporary. You may want to educate them. You may not just ignore them and come up with another story like we mean like that. Just for humor, I think humor is such a important thing, and I do joke a lot with my patients. If you know me quite well, and I joke quite a lot with my patients, and humor is very, very important. But the public here is still not well educated enough in accepting different conditions. I mean, even myself, I see kids sometimes screaming in the middle of the restaurant, right? But you think that it's bad upbringing, but the kid may be autistic. So this kind of thing is very present, very well informed in Western society, but not in Asian societies. So it's very easy for us to react and being selfish and like shooting your kid when people walk past. All that is actually quite nauseating to hear. Actually, to hear what Hui Min went through. So I hope by having all these public forums and awareness is really all about awareness, I guess. But I have not heard much from my patients themselves have any negative experience so far. But again, Hui Min is one of the younger ones. So it may be different as well. Yeah.
Okay. And the next question, I think, is directed at Dr. Lee. What kind of diet do you recommend for cancer patients?
So just now I alluded to earlier, we don't know what we put into our mouth. A lot of things are processed. A lot of things we don't know what the origin is and all that. So whether you're on chemo, on treatment, or even in general, I think try to avoid processed food as much as possible. So like personally, I tell people don't eat ham, sausage. I'm going to not let the industry kill me. But processed food like luncheon meat or pickle or can or tin or whatever. You want to eat meat, get the fresh chicken from the market and cook it as a chicken, not a chicken patty that has like coloring chemicals inside and all that. Vegetables, it's impossible. You don't have to eat organic because half the time we don't even know if the organic is truly organic. So I do tell people you don't have to specifically choose organic if you're on chemo, or even if you have cancer or you are finished your cancer treatment already, because that doesn't guarantee anything, to be honest, and it costs a lot as well. So it's more about natural food and free of coloring and processing.
Okay. Actually, it's about 7 o'clock already. I'm gonna take 2 more questions. So another question we have on our Zoom is by Hade. So hi, Heidi, maybe Heidi. So good afternoon, Dr. Lee. I'm Jasmine. My mom has breast cancer. She doesn't want to go to the oncologist because she's afraid of chemotherapy. So since she is diagnosed, she only do therapy to reduce the pain. But I feel like she needs to go to see an oncologist now. How can I convince her to do so?
So a lot of time, this is a very, very common scenario actually. You don't have to say that we're going to see the doctor to treat your cancer. You can just say we're going to talk to the doctor to see how he can help you feel better. I think don't use the word chemo, don't use the word treatment, don't use the word cancer treatment. I think mainly just to say talk to answer your questions in case your mom has any questions that she doesn't know. A lot of time is they are not well informed enough about the treatment choices, because breast cancer, there are many types. There are some that respond to hormonal tablets. So we are able to shrink some cancers with just hormone tablets alone. It doesn't have to be chemotherapy. And there are targeted therapy for certain types of breast cancer as well. So breast cancer, there are many, many different species and the treatments are different. So I think the first step is to get her into an oncologist clinic, right? So the first step is just to say, we are not going to see a doctor to start you on treatment. We are going to bring you there to let the doctor help you answer anything you're not sure and see how he can help you with your pain. You can just start off like that. And once you get there, then let the doctor do the job. And then we'll talk to them more and make them understand the differences. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lee, and I hope that answers your question, Heidi. So we have another question in our Zoom, and that is, do cancer, I think this is directed more to Hui Min, do cancer patients lose their confidence due to their personality being curbed?
Okay, so I would say, okay, so I'm just speaking for myself. So because I was in school, out of school for a year, some people might be out of school or like they're not going to work anymore. So so they lost touch with the society, because during their treatment, it's just all about going to a hospital, trying to get well and stuff like that. So we might feel like maybe we're not as extroverted and more as cheerful as what we used to be. So we might be more introverted. We don't like to talk much and anything. So yeah, so I was a little bit introverted, but I guess I made friends with a lot of nurses and like a lot of friends cancer patients. But I think one thing that the public can do is whenever you see a cancer survivor or anyone, right, going back to your workplace or school, you can help them by maybe they might be a little bit forgetful after chemo, because there's this thing called chemo brain. I don't know how true is it lah. So yeah, so you can help them by reintegrating back to the society, because after not being in school or not being in the workplace for quite a while, you might lose time. Yeah.
Just now you mentioned chemo brain, is it? Chemo
brain.
Dr. Lee, is that a real thing?
So it's a term thrown around for quite a bit, and there are some evidence to suggest that it does affect a patient's brain chemically a little bit. So no doubt that the patient's concentration and memory is a little bit worse after chemotherapy. It doesn't wipe your memory or make you old or anything like that. But I think it's also because the fatigue while undergoing chemotherapy, so that time the concentration will be less. Therefore, the memory retention also will be less. So it's kind of a function of everything together. It's not purely the chemo killing your brain cells or anything like that. Yeah. But so in general, it's called chemo brain. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, wait, we do have one more question. Let's take a last question, okay? Because I think there's no more questions really. So, my friend's uncle died due to cancer. In spite of spreading positivity to overcome it, he died due to cancer. Family cried so much. How to avoid the cancer entry? What are the symptoms to avoid? Is this very case by case basis? I think Dr. Yu can open the chat boxes inside.
How to avoid the cancer entry? What are the symptoms will be to avoid? Well, I think positivity is still very important. I mean, of course, a good mindset will still make your, even if somebody's lifespan is limited, having a positive mindset still makes the quality of life better anyway. You're not going to sit there and just count the days that you're going to pass away or anything. So living the life meaningfully, I always tell patients, if I'm treating somebody with advanced cancer, I say there's no point giving you 5 years of lying in bed every day. I'd rather give you that you have 1 year of life that you will go kayaking and go to tour Europe and all that kind of stuff. So it's all about, like Hui Min say, perspective is what gives meaning to you. So positivity is not just about saying, hey, I can beat this today, look in the mirror and say that kind of thing. Of course, it's good to say that, but it's also doing what is meaningful to you. So I'm not getting a very clear point as to how to avoid cancer entry. I'm thinking, like, of course there will be, when the time comes when the cancer is obviously getting worse, there is also no point to be in denial and keep saying positive things when you know things are going the other way. So therefore, you also don't say negative things. You also say, look, is there anything you want me to do for you? Is there anything that you want to clear, to accomplish before time comes? I think just be truthful and ask the patient's wishes. So sometimes the patient don't think of telling you what they want because they may not assume that you can help them with. So rather than saying stay positive, just using words, right? I mean, it's very frustrating for patients when they know they're going the other way. It's more important to say, look, how are you feeling now? Is there anything I can help you with? Are you in pain? Do you want me to bring medicine for you, or do you want me to book a trip for you? That kind of thing. So yeah, I think that's more to do with.
Okay. I think the part on like how to avoid cancer, I guess getting cancer is, if you have a genetic history of having cancer, I'll go for screenings, maybe go for regular screenings, regular checkup.
Yeah, correct. So I mean, as simple as it sounds, is about sleeping well, eating well, and exercising well. Genetics, unfortunately, cannot avoid. So it's about seeking help when you have a symptom that doesn't go away after 2 weeks. As I said, nowadays, even young patients get cancer quite frequently. Breast cancers are getting younger, colon cancers are getting younger. A lot of this I find happens in people with high stress jobs. So I think stress is becoming a major component. There's no direct link between it, but stress is really becoming important. So to avoid it, it really is to, like I say, eat non-processed food, sleep enough, because the only time your body will heal is when you sleep. So I'm learning that. I'm not a very good sleeper, but I'm forcing myself to sleep after seeing all these patients, right? So it's when your cells heal, when your hormones get regulated and all that, is to sleep well. So the iPhone screens and the iPad screens, they do tend to keep your brain awake 1 hour after you turn it off. So you have to turn them off at least 1 hour before you plan to sleep, because the blue light is probably a real thing. I'm not sure, but I'm trying to do that. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So anyway, that's a wrap for our Q&A section as well as our webinars. I think Dr. Ui and Hui Min has answered most of our questions, and I'm sure all of us has walked away with new insights about living with cancer and also being a caregiver to a cancer patient. So while I conclude today's webinar, I'm going to leave a feedback link in the chat box, and I would really appreciate if you guys could help fill it up. It would help us to improve the quality of the content that we put out next time. So I'm just going to quickly drop it there. Hold on. To all. Okay, so I just dropped the feedback link in the chat box. Please fill it up for me. And anyway, if you'd like to engage the services of Dr. Lee, you can do so via his clinic, International Cancer Specialist, Paragon Medical Center, or via our website, drextentis.com. I'm going to leave another message in the chat function of how you can contact Dr. Lee directly if you want to book a consultation with him or get a second opinion. So I'm just going to drop another message in the chat box. Hold on again. Where's the chat box? Chat box. Okay, in there, we have their email as well as their WhatsApp number that you can contact directly if you want to book an appointment with Dr. Lee. So next, I would like to sincerely thank Dr. Lee and Hui Min for taking the time to share your insights and story with us today. Thank you, Dr. Lee and Hui Min. I really felt very, very warm throughout the entire conversation. It's very, very heartwarming. So, and for our audience, thank you so much for being part of with us today. You guys have been a wonderful audience. As I mentioned at the start of the webinar, this session is recorded and you will be able to find it on our Facebook page, Dr. Extentis, or you can stay tuned for our post-webinar email where you will find the link to the webinar, as well as other relevant articles and curated content on cancer, as well as a doctor profile page to Dr. Lee where you can find out more about Dr. Lee also. So on behalf of everyone at Dr. Extentis, it's been our pleasure to have all of you this evening. If you have any more questions about cancer or about anything at all, you can always head on down to our website, Dr. Extentis, to drop your questions there. Our team of doctors will definitely be there to answer them for you. So with that, I wish you all a happy Wednesday. Yeah, so stay safe and goodbye. Thank you, Dr. Lee, and thank you, Hui Min. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Hui Min. Take care.